Things I just learned last week. War is bad. It's bad when one country violates the sacred national boundaries of another country. I just learned that last week. You know why? Because our entire establishment right now is yelling in my face 24/7 that this is bad, it's evil, it's wicked, it's horrible, it's horrific, it's a violation, it's an abomination and atrocity. It's a travesty, it's a tragedy. Wow, I didn't know this. I was totally unaware of this through all the decades and decades and decades of wars conducted by Washington against like half of the world. I'm glad Washington is now conscientiously instructing me that war is a bad thing. But you know what I forgot this week? I forgot that racism and white nationalism are bad things. You know why? Because I haven't had the media and the political establishment yelling at me 24/7 like I did a little while ago about the evils and horrors of white nationalism and racism. It couldn't have anything to do with the fact that their pet colony possession that looks like it may be getting ripped away from them is a white nationalist state, literally. You know, the one that they're all crying about and telling us to feel sorry for and showing hours, and we've seen millions of hours of video, of alleged video from the scene of the war. I'm sure none of that's fake, just like the babies being ripped out of incubators in Iraq, and like a good deal of other footage that we have seen in MSM over the years. I'm sure none of that's propaganda, none of that's designed to deceive you and whip you up into a frenzy of hatred and perhaps fear and give up more of your rights, give up more of your money, and manufacture your consent to intervene in yet worse ways in foreign countries. I'm sure none of it's war propaganda from Washington, because you know how scrupulous they are about telling us the truth at all times. So, further following this Ukraine-Russia situation over there, just on some of the recent developments, and then I'll go into a bit more of the background. What's happened in the last 48 hours is that Russian peacekeepers have taken control of the Donetsk and Lugansk. At least they have a presence there. I don't know if the Ukrainian military has stopped quite yet. My concern is about the people and about the United States of America's. Why are we always being dragged into these conflicts? Why is our money always being milked to go and pour into the weapons industry and to pour into yet more fruitless, purposeless, senseless wars and kill people, murder people, take their land? What do I get out of that? Anyway, but I also care about those people as well. I care about the people who are on the other end of our humanitarianism, quote unquote. Big quotes around that one. And I try not to say our or us with regard to that government over there that in fact hates us and regards me and you as the enemy. And so I call them Washington, because that's their main product is war. And it would be a grave insult to George Washington to sully his name by calling that place over there, that pit of shit over there, by the George Washington's name. I call it Washington. With all his slaves, whatever, that guy, he was a saint compared to the people who run that place today. With all their pretensions about how they're getting rid of racism, that's just them loudly trying to cover up the din of their own evil and wickedness. I was just listening to a press conference given by some Russian legislators and the head of, I think it's Donetsk, and explaining their position, explaining the fact that I'm sure no U.S. news media has explained to you, is that the state of Ukraine was discriminating and racist towards not only Russians, but any ethnic minorities within that country. They were denied from speaking their own language. The government of Ukraine, backed by the U.S., by Washington, did not allow them to speak Russian in their own communities, their own schools, etc. What if that was done here? What if we did that to Spanish here in the United States? What would happen? Now that racism goes back, racism and hyper-nationalism goes back a long time. And when we say nationalism, when Europeans talk about nationalism, they mean something very different from when Americans who call ourselves nationalists, like myself, just believers in national sovereignty. I believe in national sovereignty. I'm a nationalist in that sense. When Europeans say nationalist, they have a different meaning over there. They mean Hitler. They mean Nazi. They mean racists. The Ukrainians are racist nationalists. You could call them white nationalists. There's a deep-seated hatred for Russia, and I won't broad brush the entirety of the Ukrainian people that way, but there are varying degrees of this feeling from what I have been listening to and reading. There's varying degrees of that sentiment of hatred. Some of it has to do with the Soviet past, some of it has to do with the imperial past of Ukraine and the Russian Empire and so forth and so on. It's long and involved and complex. If you ask me, none of it makes sense in 2022, and nobody who perpetrated the old sins against you, most of those people are long gone. But anyway, there is a strong and pronounced hatred and bias and prejudice against Russians and against all other ethnic minorities. There is a Nazi contingent in that country, and they are allowed into the seats of power. They are allowed into the government and the military. In fact, they helped accomplish the coup and were funded by Washington government as part of the coup in 2014 under Obama Biden and Victoria Nuland, who's now overseeing that area for the State Department. Think about that the next time you hear these people utter one word about how righteous they are about racism. You can read about Stefan Bandera, Bandera. You can read all about him if you want to, and how influential he is over the thinking of certain portions of Ukraine, particularly in the West. The very same factions that were used by Washington to overthrow the old government, which was leaned slightly towards Russia. Slightly. And, you know, our friend, the supposed Jew from Hungary, who's behind a lot of this agitation and activism and destruction, George $0R0, that guy, the former Nazi youth. No, it doesn't really contradict the fact that he's Jewish. That's a big topic too. There are a lot of Jewish Nazis. But anyway, you know, history is, there's nothing so strange as history. But the organizations, he has a network of organizations stationed in Ukraine that purport to be like human rights, pro-democracy, you know, election watch organizations, and all they are is fronts for Washington regime change and control. They're sort of like the remote control of the Ukrainian government. And George's network of organizations just, coexist peacefully and happily with those Nazis over there that they used to overthrow the government. Again, I told you George was a Nazi himself, a Nazi youth, and he said in interviews that he didn't regret it that much. He was used to rat out fellow Jews as a kid. It didn't bother him that much. Doesn't. That was a long time ago. So that's one very, very big piece at the heart of the whole conflict that we're talking about. The other, like I said, so they have their ethnic hatred and ethnic bigotry. And by the way, there's even those, there was someone, I forget who, and I will research this and bring it next time, someone in the government of Ukraine who said we should attack Russia with nuclear weapons. We should just attack them and destroy them. Didn't we hear a guy, Roger Wicker, say that? A senator from Mississippi, that piece of shit. Didn't we hear him say that? You should nuke Russia. It should be on the table to use nukes, first strike nukes against Russia. Yeah, he said that a few weeks ago. Let's look at a little side note. Let's slide on over to Canada. Who's the Vice Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister of Canada? She's a woman named Chrystia Freeland. Freeland is not, I suppose that's a married name. She's originally Ukrainian. And she has great influence, some say, over the policies of the Trudeau Castro regime and the authoritarian, the fascism that's going on there now. Guess what her grandpa was over in Ukraine during World War II? Yeah, he was a Nazi too. One of Hitler's best, Hitler's finest in the Ukrainian Nazi organization. Isn't that something? Don't we have a perfect marriage? We have a commie and we have a Nazi. They are there represented in the perfect marriage. Fidel Castro's illegitimate bastard son, Trudeau, and Chrystia Freeland, granddaughter of a Nazi. Perfect marriage representing what our global elite, our global Klaus Schwab endorsed, World Economic Foundation endorsed global elite rulers, who they are and what they stand for. The marriage of communism and Nazism. They're all just one thing. They were sort of divided and split just to play them off against one another. Hegelian dialectic, thesis, synthesis, you get it. You've probably heard of that. If you're not, you should look it up. They are opposames, as David Icke used to say. The more you know, the less you'll be fooled by it. What's going to happen with these two republics, Donetsk and Lugansk? My guess is they're going to be annexed into Russia. Because why? Because A, they're Russians. B, they asked to annex to Russia years ago, and Russia told them, no, wait for the Minsk peace process. Wait for that process. Wait for the four countries, including Ukraine and Russia, and I think France, and I think maybe Germany, to get together and sit down in Minsk, Belarus, and we'll hammer this thing out, and we'll probably try to get you some more autonomy within Ukraine. And that went out the window. Ukraine just ignored that and continued attacking them. They continued their state of war. Minsk happened in 2015. Ukraine just ignored that since 2015. So Russia was like, okay, enough. Minsk is dead. Ukraine threw it out. It's dead. And now they're re-escalating hostilities. So is their backers, Washington and NATO. So is their backers. So it's just time to roll in and try to do something. Because You know, as Putin has stated, we don't want a larger war to break out. Also, this is about Russia. Putin has been insisting on guarantees for Russia itself that NATO is not going to absorb any more countries, you know, on its border, and that NATO is not going to grow anymore, and that there's going to be no NATO weapons, bases, and nuclear missiles in Ukraine pointed up Russia's ass. Really unreasonable, wild, crazy demands, right? Just like missiles in Cuba pointed at us, or missiles in Mexico or Canada pointed at us. Owned by Russia. Of course, the media is not telling you any of this either, are they? Biden's not telling you any of this, are they? Kamala, not telling you, Kamala or Kamala, not telling you any of that, are they? Fox News not telling you any of that, are they? Other than Tucker Carlson, maybe a couple others sometimes. So yeah, those people are going to wind up just being part of Russia, unless for some reason they want to just remain tiny, independent republics sandwiched between the big, huge, giant Russia and the smaller, giant Ukraine. I'm not sure that they would want that. I'm pretty sure they just want to become part of Russia, big Russia. But we never know. What's going to be the fate of Ukraine after all this? I'm not sure. Ukraine is sort of falling apart, literally falling apart. They just lost 2 more pieces. They had already lost a significant piece, Crimea, in, well, it was 2014, after the coup, in which they were, Ukraine was abducted and taken over by Washington and the Biden mafia and the Obama, Biden, John Kerry, Victoria Nuland, Nancy Pelosi mafia, and various people like actual, you know, street mafia people. Whitey Bulger's nephew went in business with Hunter Biden in Ukrainian gas business. As soon as the U.S. flag was planted over there, these motherfuckers went to work carving up Ukrainian natural resources. So that's why I hate these motherfuckers with a passion. They're mafia, they're pirates, they're thieves. They've declared war on me too. I take it personally, so should you. Now, this Nord Stream 2 gas line that was meant to help the Germans and other European countries get more gas higher volume of gas from Russia and bypass the gas thieves of Ukraine who had been siphoning off the gas pipeline that passed through Ukraine from Russia to other European countries. So the Nord Stream 2 Germany has announced it has been put on hold. Put on hold, that's the language. So it could probably be resumed at any time. It's already there. It just needs to be put into operation. And probably they're just going to wait and see what happens and wait until the mad dogs calm down a little bit, and maybe Biden's mental decline continues, or his power decline. They'll shove Biden out the door and put the Kamala in as the chief. Maybe they just want to see what happens and see if they can restore this pipeline, because otherwise the Germans are going to like freeze if next winter is colder than this one. I think that's all I got for now. That's all I could think of. Tune in here for more like this. Make sure you like it, share it if you found this particularly informative and or entertaining. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber already. And hey, you may even want to put this in one of your playlists like Russia, Ukraine. Or how about my very favoritist videos? Right. Thanks. Peace, love, and blessings, everybody. See you next time.